Welcome to Tech Talk with Trevor Galbraith, a video podcast that features industry leaders and experts from the electronics manufacturing community. Recorded at major events around the world and from the studios of Global SMT TV. Now here is your host, Trevor Galbraith.
So welcome to Productronica, day one here in Munich, and I'm delighted to be joined by my first guest today, which is Ajit Minocha. Nice to see you, Ajit.
Nice to see you also.
Yeah, right, I know. And like me, you're very well traveled, so you get to see a lot of what's happening around the world.
Well, this year actually travel has been more than pre-pandemic time.
Yes. Well, the pandemic was a huge disruptor to the world, but specifically, especially to semi. You had so many events around that time that were disrupted. It really threw the whole industry into a bit of a quandary. How have you survived that, and what has happened coming out the other side?
That's a good question and a very painful history that we went through. Yes, our majority of the income used to be from the events, and all those events went to really basically stand still.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we had healthy reserves, so we did not lay off anybody.
Good.
And but actually, we focused more on the other issues which were besides the events, like focus on the talent, the climate challenges that we have. Of course, supply chain disruption was the result of these issues, and so we kept the team busy in looking for other sources so that we can do the revenue diversification for semi.
Okay.
And so we kept on going with the respect to how we can really serve our members better, what we can do to create more value for members.
Yeah.
So we have multiple initiatives that we started from 2018 onwards. We have four or five strategic and smart initiatives. We actually double down on those initiatives, like smart manufacturing, smart medtech, smart mobility, and smart data. Right. And to be honest with you, that was probably blessing in disguise for us, because as you see, since the pandemic, there's a lot of convergence between semiconductors and medical. And all the work we did during pandemic is becoming very valuable now.
Valuable.
Smart mobility, the electrification and the autonomous vehicles is on the rise. Right. And SEMI has a lot of initiatives on these topics, so we doubled down on them.
Good. It's great to see that you kept up with obviously the emerging technology side of it, but the pandemic also brought in a lot of other disruptors along with it. Notably the supply chain and some of the reshoring that's going on and that sort of thing. How have you helped the industry to cope with that?
Well, first of all, pandemic was the worst thing happened to the world. 6+ million people died. Yeah. And I would never want this kind of thing to ever happen again to anybody. Yes. But the one good thing happened out of pandemic. The industry awareness, semiconductor industry awareness became very visible to everybody. People realized that how important our industry is, because we went on telehealth, working from home, even the schools were done remotely, education done remotely. So people realized the importance of semiconductors, especially the chip shortage came along with that. And the automotive cars, the automotives became another big choke point for the world. Right. The lead time on cars went to 15 months to 2 years. Yes. And so but the good thing was that the people realized how important semiconductor industry is, and it's central to everything. It's central to all the industries, and the awareness of industry became way high. As a result of this, many countries have declared semiconductor industry as a strategic for their country and important for not only economic security but also economic prosperity.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, back in the days of the Second World War, they said that steel was the key element that was a strategic thing. Today it's semiconductors, and there's no doubt about that. And governments have become, of course, very aware of that. But they've also had to go through a very steep learning curve. And of course, they've emerged through the US CHIPS Act and the equivalent over here with the European CHIPS Act. How has SEMI worked with government to advise on that? And have you been working at levels with Europe as well as US and other countries?
That's a very good question. I think there are a couple of things I want to say from the last point. That if you have you talked about the steel, you talked about the oil, gases, and all those things.
Right.
You can have a backup of those things, but there's no backup for chips.
Right.
For chips, you only need chips.
That's right.
So I think the chip industry has become much more relevant for the humanity, but I think given the importance of chip industry, the strategic nature of this industry now, the governments are taking a very extra steps to make sure that this chip shortage and the future dependence on chip does not put the humanity on hold.
Right.
So
Right.
yes, there's a CHIPS Act in US, CHIPS Act in EU. SEMI is heavily involved with all the governments, most of the governments I should say, in the CHIPS Act, because we are actually, especially in the case of US, we are part of the architect of the CHIPS Act.
Yes.
How we should support the industry at large, including equipment companies and the material companies, that they should also get benefit from the growth.
Yes.
The good thing is this, which is very important, this industry has grown to $580 billion IC revenue last year. It took 65 years almost 70 years to come to the $580 billion or $600 billion. And now the next 10 years, it will double to 1 trillion. So there is so much growth happening in this industry, and it is happening because of the so many disruptions coming at one time.
Yes.
It's 5G to 6G to 7G, the quantum computing, neuromorphic computing,
Yes.
Autonomous vehicles, but I call it autonomous machines, with all this connectivity with
Absolutely.
IoTs, this AR, VR, and
All these
AI.
things are converging at once. Yeah.
All those things, AI is going to be another major fuel for the growth. So I'm very convinced that this industry is going to double to 1 trillion. We've been saying 2030, but given the current climate in terms of Russia-Ukraine war and the Middle East crisis, maybe it's 31 or 32 or 33. It's going to happen.
Right.
So
Right.
I think industry is growing rapidly, and that's why the CHIPS Act from various countries are very critical, that where SEMI plays a big role in helping members to navigate through the process, how to apply for the subsidies and the grants, and so especially the small companies, the mid-sized companies, they're depending heavily on SEMI to guide them.
Right. Well, as you said, there's a number of things driving all of this, and part of this is de-risking the supply chain. It's also bringing in ESG and sustainability. It makes no sense to ship things halfway across the world. They should be consumed closer to where they're being manufactured. Closer to where they're being consumed. But all that's driving more manufacturing, more growth, etc., etc. So you came out with a system recently, and I'm struggling to remember the acronym, but it was regarding a tool to help companies benchmark their where they were in the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, I think there's more than that. The climate issues have been really affecting the industry big time. When was the last time you heard freeze in Texas? Yes. We had twice freeze in Texas during pandemic. That shut down quite a few factories in Texas.
Yeah.
The number of fires have been more fires around the world, and especially in the countries which was not very common.
Yes.
And also the number of typhoons and the tornadoes. They're having more unpredictability of the calamities.
Yes.
And the frequency has also increased.
Yes.
So we are actually not just focused on, we have actually launched a major initiative on the climate called Semiconductor Climate Consortia. We had 65 founding members last year at COP27. And we are actually now working a structured program with the industry, 90-some members of the companies and industries, that we're going to have a phased approach. How do we solve the problems of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3,
Right.
so that we bring closure to the net zero goal with the as per Paris Accord,
Right.
by maybe 2045, 2050, not 2060 or 2070 as many countries and companies.
Okay.
But other thing to ask before coming to specific answer to your comment, we have so many issues right now in the industry. I talked about the 1 trillion path to 1 trillion,
Yes.
but we have headwinds like talent shortage.
Yes.
The STEM education has gone down by factor of 2 in last 20 or 30 years in Western world.
Yes.
in the Asian countries, the population has gone down, although STEM education is still popular, whereas the industry is going double, and STEM education population has gone half. So the problem is 1/4 of the 4 times the problem. So SEMI has a major initiative on multiple initiatives to increase the pipeline population in the pipeline at various levels, from technicians to the masters and PhDs and engineering level.
And that's
so on.
important.
And also we focus on diversity. Maybe for the next time I can spend more time on diversity.
Yeah.
Also, at the same time, the number of initiatives we have to really help increase the productivity and the output, because you get to the 1 trillion, you're going to spend billions of dollars to add more capacity around the world.
Yeah.
But this productivity can also help reduce the headwind.
Yes.
And the one other point is that all these global challenges, no single CEO, no single company, no single country can solve them. It requires collaboration. Global solutions require global collaboration.
Exactly.
So SEMI has been very active in the initiatives I talked about, that smart manufacturing. So in smart manufacturing, we really are looking at kind of a mapping of where the companies are in terms of their productivity, in terms of the output, in terms of the quality, in terms of the yield, and how we bring advances in those operations so that they can all increase the output and solve the chip shortage problem. Now, people might think that the supply chain problems are gone. No, they are not gone, because we haven't fixed the supply chain issues yet. Right now, because of the economic downturn, there's definitely a excess inventory, but this is all temporary.
Yes.
Once the
burn through that
economic downturn changes, which I'm sure I am hoping and praying that these wars stop and we start rebuilding those nations which are affected.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see and with the growth I talked about, we'll see the supply chain problems will come back. But SEMI is working very aggressively on designing a new blueprint on supply chain. The blueprint in the past was based on one philosophy called just in time.
Okay.
And during the last 3-4 years, pandemic, calamities, geopolitical issues, all that led to massive supply chain fragmentation.
Yeah.
So is it just in case philosophy now on supply chain? I don't know, but SEMI is addressing that.
Yeah.
So specifically to smart manufacturing, that will also help the supply chain issues, because we need to have the much more agility and flexibility in our manufacturing, but with more output and productivity.
Absolutely. And as you say, it has to be done at a global level. Ajit, we've got multiple topics that we could spend an awful lot of time talking on, but unfortunately we're running out of time here today. But I want to thank you very much for just giving us a small snapshot of some of the things that are, that you're working on at SEMI today.
No, anytime. I think just in the closing, I will say one thing, that SEMI philosophy on the geopolitical issues is we're country neutral, company neutral.
Yeah.
But recently, in my recent last 2 weeks ago, I created a multilateral platform with policymakers from all over the world and the top 50 industry executives. We sat together and discussed the global challenges that cannot be solved without the government participation.
Right.
And we had a huge success out of that. The policymakers all agreed that we should work together, and we will work together, and we will be part of the solution with the industry.
That's interesting. The same thing happened in London over the topic of AI. All the world leaders got together. They're obviously starting to understand the importance that we're all interconnected. So, Ajit, I look forward to seeing what happens over the coming months. But
sure, anytime.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.